presented here for your consideration the notion that the ordinary people surrounding you every day, on the street, the bus, at the post office, or the trendy evening venue, are, in fact, far from ordinary. That these men, women, and others form their own splinter groups behind closed doors, and that these micro-societies engage in activities often more obscure than fiction. Welcome to the Sub-Subculture. Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Sub-Subculture Podcast. I am your host and considered to be an aphrodisiac by three varieties of woodland creature, Andrew.
I have serious doubts about those claims. But anyway, I'm Joe, the first mouse who didn't get the cheese.
Because he was too busy chasing after my cock.
No, I got crushed in a mouse trap.
Oh.
But the second guy, for those who come after, he got it.
He climbed over your corpse to get that cheese.
Yeah, boy.
Good.
What are we doing here?
So far, basically bestiality. Nope, cut that.
Welcome, listeners. Welcome.
Today we're talking about football fandom, or what it is to be a football fan, or soccer for our international listeners who say things wrong.
I've actually got a fun soccer fact.
Okay.
The term soccer came from association football.
So fun.
I'm sorry, I know how much you hate learning.
Sorry, came from association football.
Yeah, shortening association to a soccer. And so it's not actually an American corruption of the English language. It's an old term which has fallen out of favour in the UK, which Americans picked up.
Because we need to know exactly what it is. A Ronseal thing when you say it's a football. Hit it with your foot and it's a ball. Done.
Unlike American football, which you don't necessarily hit with your feet. Sometimes you do, but it's basically like body ball.
You mostly cuddle it.
Stupid term. Come on, guys, get your act together.
Anyway, football fandom. Where is the line between a hobby and love for the game to a willfully blind loyalty and mob mentality that can spill over into violence? That's what we're here to discuss. That's what we want to talk about, and that's what we're going to educate you suckers with.
Damn. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to receive the good word.
Good.
Great Church of Andrew.
The hand of God might come down and bless you. It's a Maradona term. That's an inside joke for football fans.
Nice.
You're welcome. That's as far as my knowledge goes.
I actually know about that one. That must be like one of the three football incidents that I can name in the last 100 years.
It's because it's from the fucking 80s and we've stopped absorbing things in the last 30 years.
The 80s was the peak of our culture.
Anyway, sorry. Preconceptions. What did you think about being a football fan before you started digging into this?
So we were kids in the 90s at primary school.
Correct.
And football was as we'll probably cover more later, it was practically a religion amongst young boys then. And we had these football sticker annuals, and people would always ask, what team do you support? What team do you support? And I didn't understand it even then. It's like, well, we live nearest Reading. That's the biggest city of any size. It's technically not a city. It's a large town, but whatever. Their team was in Division 2 at the time. No one cared about that. It was all Premier League stuff. So it's like, I don't know. I suppose I should support Reading, but no one cares about that. So I don't know, Arsenal, maybe? And I stuck with that for about a week before pretending to care tired me out too much. And ever since then, I've just told people I don't care about football. And it's always baffled me how people can feel so strongly about something that they have no influence on the outcome of. Oh, we beat so-and-so at the weekend. It was amazing. Was it? You didn't do shit. You just sank 6 pints in a pub and scratched your ass. Well, why do you feel any pride for this achievement?
That's part of the ritual.
Part of the ritual, yeah.
They're a superstitious lot. If they didn't sink that sixth pint, the goal wouldn't have gone in.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, even to the point of doing this research, that's basically as far as I'd got. I just can't wrap my head around football and why it was so, like, the globally most popular sport. Makes no sense to me, or made no sense to me. I might have learned something. What about you?
Such a tease. Maybe I learned something. Maybe I'll share it. My experience is not dissimilar to yours. As someone who grew up around British kids, although not exclusively, I think it was probably around 8, 9 that I was exposed to this more, which is kind of late because I think as a football fan or a football kid, then you're into this a lot earlier. But my dad was never into any sort of sport of any form, really. I don't count motor racing as a sport, by the way, just in case that was a glint in your eye that you saw there.
You wouldn't count motorsport as a sport?
No, it's a misnomer. So other boys being a fan of some specific club even abroad. So when we were living overseas, there were still British kids that were like really into Manchester United or whatever. It was completely alien. I didn't get it.
Glory hunters.
And this, as you said, it was back in the 90s, which meant it was mostly Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, and maybe a few others. Those are like the top tier clubs that boys were into. So later in life, it was just like an obsession for people and a club that I was a complete outsider to. So when we went to secondary school, they'd be playing football every single lunchtime, talking about football that they watched on TV. They had seemed to have considered opinions on players and managers. And I mean, if you think about it now, they were largely just echoing whatever pundit was on TV, right? But they all spoke about it with such authority that they really knew.
That is basically 99% of human interactions.
Just repeating what you heard from someone else,
Yeah, without any real critical thought.
But like you said, there was, the merch is everywhere. They collected stickers. They wore the shirts at the appropriate times. And it just seems like it's an ingrained part of British alpha male culture. If you want to start sizing someone up, it's that question that you mentioned. Or what team do you support? And that's immediately going to decide whether I like you or I don't like you.
I dread that question. It happens a lot still with conversations with normal people. It's kind of like a conversational fallback. It's conversational safe ground a lot of the time. Oh, do you see the football? What team do you support?
For a certain type of guy, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people will have an answer to that. And it is a bit alienating when you go, I don't care, mate. Was England playing? I didn't know. Oh, they were in the final. Huh, interesting. No, I didn't see it. And it kind of immediately drives a wedge between you because it's like, well, this guy doesn't like football. That's fucking unnatural.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but to some of them, that feels like you're basically challenging their identity by not liking the thing that they've formed a fervent belief around. Yeah, I guess
if your identity is, I like football, then yeah, maybe it would be existentially threatening.
There's a surprising number that are like that. I mean, I've worked with guys that have had season tickets for their team and they've grown up in the same area and they've gone to these football matches, like 90% of matches since they were however old, with their dad or not with their dad, doesn't matter.
Since they were knee high to a grasshopper.
They go to the home games and know exactly where they go in the stands and which stall has the best pork scratchings with the hair still on them and some fucking horrible rituals like that. But then they also go on these disgusting away games where they get bussed in the fucking shittiest coaches you can imagine en masse with a bunch of other sweaty misanthropes that you don't know, getting taken away to some other city to get scorn poured on you just to watch a crappy game in shitty weather to then be bussed back again for however many hours. It's like a coach trip from hell, and coach trips aren't good in the first place.
It sounds like living hell to me.
It does.
But they're not just a bunch of stranger misanthropes. They're your tribe.
Yes.
They're your brothers in arms.
Tribes come into it. I think largely as an export of Britain, it's now seen as a culture of hooliganism and violence in the worst cases to outsiders, because that's what you see on TV and that's what you remember. No other sport has so, ingrained in it the level of violence and riots outside of football that you see from particularly British fans abroad. So
you don't see a lot of tennis riots, tennis violence.
Yeah. Golf riots are pretty hardcore.
Well armed, for sure.
Yeah. So all of that rambling, not quite narrative forms what I knew about football already and how I saw it growing up and up to the present day. It's just something that I live on the outside of the sphere of, not like the sweet inner sphere of the hollow earth that most people inhabit. Throwback to our hollow earth episode. Go and listen. It's amazing.
Yeah, it feels like I'm missing a piece of my brain or missing an organ or missing a limb or a sense or something. Like I have a complete emotional blank when presented with football. Like we were talking about off air before we started recording, the offside rule. I have read it many times. I read it again today and I can still barely remember how it works because it's like trying to grasp like greased Teflon. It does nothing.
I think that you would find that a lot of casual supporters are probably not far off your view on that. They just scream it every now and then when everyone else screams it.
Yeah, maybe. Offside. Yeah, maybe. Oh, God. Is it?
I remember, I'll keep it a short story, but I remember I used to skive out of PE lessons in school a lot. Like, I didn't want to do physical education. I basically laminated a note from my mum that was legit at the time, and used it for about a year. And that just meant that you didn't have to get changed, but the teacher still dragged you out onto the field where the other boys were playing football just fully clothed in your uniform in secondary school. And they were like, okay, well, you be the referee then, because we're going to watch this other pitch of boys also doing the same activity because there's far too many of you fuckers. And then suddenly you're just the biggest villain. Rather than not just having got out of PE, you're also casting the worst role in this particular harrowing pantomime.
The ref,
so they'd be like,
wanker.
kicking it back and forth. They'd be like screaming offside at each other. Offside! Didn't you see that, ref? Wasn't it offside? And I was like, yeah, all right. It can be. Like, I've got any fucking clue what that means.
I've got no stake in the outcome of this.
Yeah. There's 22
Sure.
of you. It doesn't matter what I say. 11 of you are going to want to fucking punch me in about 10 seconds.
Yep. And at the end of that match, 22 people wanted to punch you.
Yeah. As if they didn't to start with, let's be fair.
PE, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. That's the latter half of the British education system. God, I'm so glad I went back to that country. What a treat.
Yay.
Anyway, would you like a little definition? A cheeky definition?
Hit me up.
So if we look at sites like culturematters.org.uk and the evergreen source of information, Wikipedia, football itself is described as a working class people's game in the UK. But the fandom of it, and I guess the game itself, is a deeply emotional and tribal phenomenon.
I've heard football described as the gentleman's game for thugs, whereas rugby is the thug's game for gentlemen.
I mean, the question that came up to my mind to start with was, why do people engage with a relatively calm, non-violent sport as football with such varying degrees of passion? Because watching it and the game itself is pretty tame. The pitches are massive. The guys have to run a lot as they're kicking the ball around, and then every now and then one of them falls over and makes the biggest fucking scene out of it, as opposed to rugby, American football, ice hockey, where they literally pummel each other into the ground or ice and just get back up again like they're made out of elastic.
Footballers have still got most of their teeth.
I know. What a fucking disgrace.
They're clearly pretenders compared to ice hockey.
You blow your nose in their direction and they like jump on the ground and cover their faces.
Yeah. Rugby players have got cauliflower ears. But yeah, footballers, an opposing player taps them and they spring into the air, folded up, sometimes grabbing the wrong limb and crumple to the ground, roll around in agony until they do or don't get a card. I don't know, stuff like that's sad.
Yep.
Shall we do a little history of football?
All right, we can.
Prepare the litanies of history.
While you have a think about that, I'll just drop some more, I guess, fandom facts on you. There's an article on institut.com. What a fucking horrible thing that was to look up. It's an online learning and certification site, but it's from February last year. And they had a statistic that 80% of fans attending live games of football feel that their support for their club is a key piece of their identity.
Bruh.
Yeah, I know. And individuals create an identity and sense of belonging through their affiliation with a team. And this fosters a sense of belonging and shared purpose. So this is kind of what we're getting into. This is the fandom we're talking about.
Belonging is key to this, I think, as we'll see. So, history.
L'histoire.
Before modern football, Cuju was played in ancient China and involved kicking a ball towards a target. There isn't a direct link between this and modern football, but...
Great, I'm glad you told us. Sounds relevant. Keep going.
It's a game played with a ball and a foot. Ancient Greeks and Romans had various ball games. Medieval France had a game called La Soule. Italy developed one of their own. Britain had violent forms of, quote, mob football, often played between villages with vague boundaries, huge numbers of participants, and few consistent rules.
But then in the 2000s, we put in rules.
Using the famous inflated pig's bladder. So these were football-like games, but they weren't exactly recognisable as modern football. But basically, humans over history have enjoyed kicking a ball around and found it enjoyable.
Humans over history have been compelled to kick things with their feet that resemble a spherical object.
Yes.
It's in our nature.
So in medieval times, England had forms of football that spanned various centuries. A typical match might involve a couple of villages, dozens to hundreds of men, a target some distance away, carrying, kicking and wrestling. And it was basically a riot that moved up and down.
Yeah. Sounds more like somewhere between a riot and a rugby game.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like rugby. In fact, that's a good point. So we'll get to that in a second. Kings and local authorities repeatedly tried to suppress such games because they caused disorder and supposedly distracted men from archery practice. So this is where football's association with mass participation, local rivalries and violence begins. So basically, almost at the very beginning of it. So the next development came in public schools i.e. private schools. For international listeners, private and public school means the same thing, a fee-paying school in the UK. God knows why that's the case. In the 18th and 19th centuries, schools such as Eton and Harrow and Rugby and Winchester played their own versions of football, and each of them had their own different rules. Some allowed carrying the ball, some allowed hacking opponents in the shins, whether they had the ball or not, heavy tackling, etc., etc. Others more interested in kicking and dribbling and passing, and with restrictions on how the ball was handled. And so you can probably see where this is going. This basically ended up splitting into rugby football and association football, which is to know. So in 1848, students at Cambridge tried to reconcile the various school codes. The Cambridge rules were not modern football's final rulebook, but they were an important attempt to create a common kicking game and influence later codification. So then we have Sheffield and other early clubs. Sheffield FC was founded in 1857 and developed the Sheffield Rules. It's generally recognised as the world's oldest surviving independent football club. Important thing about having codified rules was it saved time, because now when two teams met to play football, they didn't have to spend ages negotiating what the rules actually were going to be for the game they were playing. So in 1863, representatives of London area clubs met, and over 6 meetings they debated what football should permit. The most important dispute concerned carrying the ball and hacking opponents. So this is what finally prompted the split into rugby and football. Interesting that they were originally the same sport. So basically, in 1863, in London, modern football, association football, was invented.
You keep using the word interesting, but I can see your eyes closing as you're reading this.
I'm trying, okay?
And in the Anglican Church, they invented bum ball, where you greased up an altar boy and all tried to tackle him to the floor.
The formalised game initially had strong links to elite schools and educated players, but it spread rapidly through industrial Britain during the late 19th century. Clubs often developed around factories, churches, neighbourhoods, workplaces, industrial towns, etc. Several conditions helped. Saturdays were half days for workers, which gave them leisure time and gave rise to Saturday matches. The railways, which were becoming common, allowed teams and supporters to travel more easily. Industrial cities had dense populations for both a player base and a fan base, and the game crucially required little equipment. This is why it's become the everyman sport, because you can play it with the ball pretty much anywhere on a pitch of varying size with a couple of piled up jumpers for posts, and you can play it with anything from 2 people to 100 people. So this is how the working class kind of reclaimed it. It started with them, with the peasants.
It's that's the interesting bit, though. Like you said, they're like, hey, what are all those fucking posh boys up to? Well, they're running around like twats after a balloon. What a bunch of knobs.
Yeah.
Although that does look sort of fun. Shall we have a go, George?
Shall we adopt some of these rules?
Hold on, let me just put my leg back on, which is dropped off from leprosy, and then I'll have a go.
So yeah, and football's evolved since then. Well, the important thing about adopting formal rules is city clubs could play each other. And again, they knew what they were doing, and eventually a league was devised, and this changed these one-off spectacle matches into a narrative throughout the year or throughout the season and helped boost the cultural impact. So eventually the FA was formed, the Football Association, and there was an argument between rich southerners who said the game should be strictly amateur, players shouldn't be paid for their time playing, and they should just be independently wealthy if they wanted to play football, and the northern the northern clubs said no, these are working men, they should be paid for their time because they can't just give up their jobs to come and play football.
We're northern, right? We don't do anything for fucking free.
I ain't lifting a finger, mate. But yeah, it makes sense. And this basically gave rise to professional football, and the FA legalised professionalism in 1885. So it can now be an occupation rather than just merely a leisure activity for wealthy men. Another win for the working class there. In some ways, obviously not everyone could become a professional, but back then professional footballers, they would be from your community. You would maybe know them down the pub. They were much more like the common man, much more like the fans than they are now. They were paid normal wages and lived normal lives, but just happened to do football.
I reckon you probably decided in the community who was going to be the professional footballer. Like you all got together to play from the factory or whatever, but then you decided, oh well, Ben's probably the okayest one of us. He's got the least scabs, and we can afford to let him go from the factory.
Well, Benjamin's He's quite quick on his feet. He's got most of his limbs. And he's pretty shit down Mill. I don't think we'll miss him.
Exactly.
Off you go, lad.
We can allow him to go and become the town professional football player.
Do it for us, Tim. So the FA Cup began in 1871. And for a while, between around the early 1900s and the 1980s, I would say, football basically didn't change much. It was mostly something you experienced at a pitch. You could get it on the radio and things like that, but it became more popular to televise in the 80s and 90s and onwards, and it began being exported to people that were outside that immediate vicinity of where it was happening.
I don't know. I'm going to say that it's earlier than that. If you think about the first and last time England won a World Cup was in 1960-something, 66?
66.
That was all, that was a World Cup, so it was already organised on a global scale by then. But it was available to the masses through television, and that's how a lot of people would have been able to engage with it, and listening to it on the radio as well. Like the radio in your front room and having the radio tuned to a certain channel that all the family would sit around used to be much more of a normal thing for a family to do. So I think
family event.
Yeah, broadcast media had picked up before then, but yeah, the mass commercialization scale of things is really going to have rocketed from the 80s onwards because, like, I guess commercialization of most things was really powered through then.
And now, in the post-2000s up to the modern era, football has become a massively commercial, very lucrative industry, although most of the revenue made goes to footballer wages. And 20% or so of the revenue was from match days, from the local fans. The other 80% comes from merch and international exports and broadcasting deals and TV rights and all this other kind of stuff. And it's a huge industry all on its own now.
I'm surprised that you think that percentage goes to player wages, because there's not really that many professional players. And yeah, some of them might be on, a lot of them are on millions and millions, but as a commercial entity, football clubs aren't owned by the local factory owner anymore. They are corporations and they're owned by shareholders. I would guess a lot of that goes back to, the commercial enterprise that is Manchester City Football Club Inc. or something.
Oh yeah, they're not running a charity here, these owners. These billionaire owners.
Exactly.
But it looks around 60% of club revenue goes on player wages directly. It's quite a bit.
That is surprising. Surprises me.
And typical club revenue, say Liverpool, was around 700 million in the 24-25 season, with a net profit after much tax fiddling, no doubt, of around 8 million.
I think there's a distinction, probably somewhere to be drawn there when it says club revenue. Like, the club will be one thing, but the brand will be something else, and so on and so on. Yeah,
it's hard to really get a full picture. But what we can agree on is we're talking about a lot of money here.
Yeah, it's not a working man's club anymore. Let's put it that way. So we know roughly the history of football and organised football there. Unfortunately, as even trustworthy source like the Encyclopedia Britannica notes, that fandom of football, particularly in the UK, has spawned an epidemic of spectator hooliganism, which has intensified since the 1960s. And I'm sure my fellow countrymen will be glad to hear some of the most notable early examples of this come from Scotland.
Aye, Scotland, the brave. Take that, you English gobshite.
And two Glasgow teams in particular, Rangers and Celtic, where religious sectarianism played a role.
That fueled the violence.
In the fan base and the violence, yeah.
Fantastic. Organised religion, once again, on the wrong side of history.
However, I think it's fair to say that English football fandom has become notorious for hooliganism, particularly overseas.
Hang on a minute. Are you saying Scotland did, in fact, invent football violence?
No, but they'll tell you they did.
Yeah, they'll claim anything.
Yeah.
Scotland invented hooliganism, don't you know? The English stole it.
And exported it and did it much more violently. Well, maybe not more violently.
Much better. With a greater style and violence.
It's possible to say that football hooliganism, or the scale of it, or the violence of it, reached its visible peak in about 1985, when in a European Cup final, fucking Liverpool fans.
In Liverpool?
They charged the opposing team supporters, that would be Juventus, and part of the stadium collapsed under the weight of those fleeing. This was when they were playing abroad in Belgium, so not even somewhere that...
Wow. The audacity, not even on their home turf.
Yeah. So they charged this, the stadium collapsed. Fucking 39 people died in that stadium collapse, and 400 odd were injured. And then the bit I didn't know, which is kind of cool, British teams were then banned from EU competitions until 1990.
Wow.
So they had a 5-year ban thanks to the violent activities of football fans.
Yeah, that's our wonderful reputation abroad.
Stirs my patriotic vigour.
Weak Spaniards, couldn't take it. Weak Belgian stadium, rubbish. Not like a good Sheffield stadium.
Is that the one that collapsed?
The Hillsborough one.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Hillsborough Stadium was the one in Sheffield that collapsed. The worst sporting disaster in UK history. Sorry, did it collapse? No, it didn't collapse.
Part of the stands collapsed, I think. There was a big crush.
It was a big crush, that's what it was.
And 17 people got stubbed toes. Worst accident on British soil since the Luftwaffe.
97 people died and 766 were injured.
Counting stubbed toes.
That's wild.
I think it's probably best to say on balance that the majority of fans, from in-person to armchair to down the pub, supporters are not necessarily violent and xenophobic.
No.
Allow tumbleweed to blow.
For clarity as well, with the Hillsborough one, that wasn't a direct result of fan violence. Maybe fan enthusiasm, but the ongoing inquiries afterwards concluded that it was mismanagement of the crowd by police that allowed this to happen.
Yeah, it's your fault for not protecting us from our own riotous instincts.
Well, they weren't rioting. They were just trying to get in. And more and more people kept piling in, I think. And the people at the front were getting crushed. And the stadium was over capacity. Police shouldn't have let people in. How it became the police's responsibility to police these events, I don't know. You'd think it would be stadium officials, but, you know, every safety regulation is written in blood. And I guess this is one more of them.
It's also noted that since the 80s, there have been significant efforts globally in organised supporter groups and from clubs and from governing bodies to discourage violence and racism and sexism in football.
It's a lot of isms.
So some club fan groups self-police themselves, and before going to matches, or they kind of open a dialogue with local authorities prior to games. International groups like Fair Play have introduced awards and incentives for the best behaved supporters at tournaments, while clubs themselves now, and this might be a double-edged sword, they've made an effort to tailor their stadiums when they've been redoing them to take out the stands or the terraces, as they called it, so it's not standing room only, that's now only seated, and they have dedicated spots for families and typically don't serve alcohol, I think particularly international games. Now, some fan organizations say that that's a good thing and it, you know, encourages more people into the sport. It doesn't seem like a big rowdy group of working class men. It encourages women and families and people to bring their kids along to them. Others see it more as, hey, now we can charge twice as much for these tickets because it's not just stands, and we can bump the prices up and so on and so on and so on. It just adds to the commercialization of it. So on some sides, you can see it as football as an organization is trying to be more accommodating and move away from its violent and sort of a certain type of person goes to football matches kind of crowd. On the other hand, they are doing it to tap into a wider market to increase their profits.
I mean, these things can both be true, right? It can be done for the right reasons and also create more money.
Mm-hmm. In fact, if you've got two reasons, that's even better.
Yeah. I don't know. So there are some matches where you can't get served a beer.
Mm-hmm.
God, that's lame.
I know. I found it personally insulting when we went to the international ice hockey games in 2017 in Paris, and it wasn't fucking cheap to go there. It wasn't fucking cheap to stay there. It wasn't fucking cheap to exist in Paris. And then when you got into the stadium, they'd basically strip searched you and taken all liquids off of you so that you can't go in with God knows what they were expecting me to take into. And ice hockey fans aren't like that, it's different. But inside the stadium, they only served alcohol-free beer as well. It was like the final insult.
Oh my God. Yeah, you can see there might be a link between alcohol sales and violence. But at the same time, there's a sort of dangerous edge to some of these events that is part of the appeal for spectators. Even the ones that aren't planning on getting involved in a fist fight completely remove alcohol. It's like, God, this feels like a kid's birthday party now.
Well, if you click through any of the top YouTube-y clickbaity things on football fans and football hooliganism, they immediately like to point to a drinking culture, and that's what makes people violent. But it's not that.
The UK doesn't have a drinking culture. What are you talking about? We're not internationally renowned for it.
If you look at the current FIFA World Cup, there was all the reports in the papers that particularly the Scottish fans had drunk Boston dry from being there. Like they were having to get extra deliveries, and pubs and stuff couldn't keep up with the demand from all the international tourists, particularly the Scots.
God, makes you proud.
Makes my liver proud and swollen. But I think what you said earlier on about tribalism is exactly the term that kind of sticks with me when I start to look at this, because it's usually a large group of heavy-set men all wearing the same colours, often painting their faces as well if you want to take it to the extreme.
Or skinny little twerps.
And yeah, if we want to take the slightly snobbish view of this as the working class sport, which as a social group would traditionally be associated with lower levels of education, for example. I mean, these are the people that a few hundred years ago, before we had association football that you've just educated us on, they would have been on the front lines of the militias in battle, you know? They were the small groups of men that's their outlet for their violence was going and hacking up another village over who got that last cow or something like that. So it doesn't wander too far away from it. You can basically see them in the field lining up when you're staring at this big group of fans now. They just don't fight over farming land in a village. It's now, you know, whether that red card was deserved or something.
This guy 300 years ago would have been a peasant kicking a pig's bladder up and down the street, fighting with 100 other people. And then 100 years ago, he would have been a mine worker. And in the modern day, he's someone else. But not every football fan is a working class person. It transcends class, I think, even though I'd say its supporter base is predominantly working class.
I think the hardcore end of the fan base certainly feels like that's where they're from, or that's why they act in a certain way. If you want to take there's some other bits there's some stuff around the dark side. I don't want to go too far into it now. Give the game away. We can save that for a bit later.
It's a game of two halves, this.
Way, football reference.
Nice.
It's football crazy. It's football mad.
That's me.
That's the kind of voice that I hear when there's anything to do with football. They even use it in adverts, like for football merch in the UK. Remember the stuff that was marketed to us when we were kids and teenagers? Stickers and bits of chocolate or whatever it was. It's always that sort of chanting, makes you feel like you're in a football stadium kind of thing to sell you some crap.
The chants are quite amazing. There's almost like a telepathic connection, it seems, among the fans. How do they know which one they're singing next? It's probably just organised through a WhatsApp group or something like that now, but
I can tell you a little bit about that from having seen it up close in the stands at ice hockey games, but there's often a guy or more than one guy or a guy for a certain part of the stadium who basically stands with his back to the thing. So he's not even really there to watch the game. He stands with his back to the game, directing the chants of the loyal supporters, like which chant they're going to start singing now. Like he'll shout one thing and they'll shout the next thing back, and he's usually got a megaphone and his shirt off.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's he's basically the cheerleader for this. And this is part of the reason why people get into it. It's called collective effervescence, which is a sociological term for the synchronized energy experienced by a crowd when they're singing the same chant, jumping at the same time, and they're sharing a collective gasp with like 5,000 other strangers. It apparently creates a powerful and almost spiritual high that is hard to find in sort of other areas of our modern life.
There is something to this, and it's the same mechanism at work at a concert for a big band with 100,000 people all moving in unison or singing in unison. There's a almost spiritual or transcendent quality to it, I think. And it's the same thing that they use that's been exploited for thousands of years in churches and hymns, and the idea of everyone gathering in one place, doing something together, singing together. And it does create a kind of otherworldly vibe and sense of belonging. You know what I mean? You experience this kind of thing?
Yeah, it makes me want to get out of there as fast as fucking possible. Like, it's very uncomfortable for me to be in those settings. Even at a concert where you know all the words, and I do not like being around other people like that. I don't find it, spiritually uplifting to be screaming along with other people. I find it very threatening. Back to my rock.
You're such a misanthrope, and I'm here for it. But yeah, I think there's more than a few parallels between football and religion, especially as religion has declined. Football hasn't. And I think a lot of the things religion provides, football can also provide you. You've got a place of worship, which is a stadium. You've got saints who are club legends from days of yore or current times. There's heretics who are players that left to go to another team. You've got hymns and psalms, these chants that they sing. You've got regular worship on a Saturday afternoon. You've got important events in your history, in your holy book of, things like the Hillsborough disaster. There's a lot of parallels, and the community can go and enjoy a football game. It's something that granddads can do with their sons and their grandchildren. And, they might have gone to the same stand for the last 60 years. And yeah, there's a kind of, it's tied into culture and family and community, or it can be if you want it to be, in a way that is very similar to religion, I think.
That kind of goes back to my question of why do people engage with it? Like, as I said, it's a non-violent sport. For me, it feels fairly boring to watch. But things like this collective effervescent experience form some of the reason that people are going back. You get this vibe with other people and you just want to experience more of it. And this is well researched. So that in particular came from an article called The People's Game, Evolutionary Perspectives on the Behavioral Neuroscience of Football Fandom from Frontiers in Psychology. And then what you've mentioned about family and generational bonding is actually mentioned in Does Anyone Care Where They're From? The Importance of Locally Trained Players in English Football by Soccer and Society. And they say for some groups of fans, like supporting a club is a family heirloom and it's passed down from grandparent to parent to children. And watching a game in a way is how you stay connected to your, not just the area you're from, but your family roots as well. Like you say, you might go to the same stand that granddad went to. You might even remember family members that used to go to the game that aren't with you anymore for whatever reason, because he stood in the terraces all of the 70s smoking fucking 20 a day. But that's a different story. Although, again, I think there's this another side to that. And it almost sounds snobbish to say, but it's about people that are too dumb to think for themselves. not necessarily, but that's the extreme way of saying it. But it kind of belies a lack of need for the individual to think for themselves when you ask them the ever important question in football culture. Oh, so what team do you support? Well, I support Man U because my dad supported Man U and his dad supported Man U. Like, yeah, but why do you like it? What would you like to do? Do you definitely still want chicken tendies for dinner because granddad had it?
I think, on the one hand, it's easy to ridicule that as, there's no intrinsic value to this person about this club or anything like that. They don't necessarily point to the way they play or the club ethos that they particularly like and why they're connected to it. But on the other hand, I think having a connection to your family and your history like that, I think that's a fair motivation to want to support a club. So let me tell you a story, a very brief one, about my friend Mark, who grew up on the outskirts of Stoke-on-Trent and has been a lifelong Stoke City supporter. His mum was club secretary for 30 odd years, and he's lived and breathed Stoke City his entire life, and he's a very intelligent man. He works for NASA out in the US, and he's still a fervent Stoke supporter, and he's one of the smartest people I know. And I should really ask him someday, why Mark, why any of this? But it's culturally ingrained in him, and he's a very rational guy and not prone to emotional flights of fancy. Yet football, maybe it snuck in when he was a kid before he developed critical faculties. I don't know, but anyway, it's ingrained in him. It's part of his identity.
Well, you were laughing at that a little while ago, saying that people that make their support for their club an intrinsic part of their identity. But it's quite well researched and documented. There's a lot of surprising number of academic papers available on exactly that kind of thing. The length and depths that fans will go to and how they see football as a game. Not even how they see it as a game, but just how they're committed to a club. So there's, apart from the reason of it being safe drama or a low stakes emotional outlet, because you can kind of shout about something, on the milder side, you can scream about something, even if it's down the pub or at the game for 90 minutes at the weekend. And
are you blind, ref? He was obviously offside.
It has no lasting impact on your well-being or your families or the people around you. It's kind of a safe way to vent. I've got some breakdown of different types of fan behavior. I've got some stuff about studying patterns of behavior in fans. How much do you want to get into this?
Do it to the max.
Do it now. Do it now. Support Liverpool. I can't say it.
I had no idea there's so many syllables in Liverpool.
So researchgate.net article from October 2025. The focus is on Croatian fans in particular, but a lot of the themes are pretty easy to see universally applied to football fans. So according to a recent study by the European Club Association, so we can see that this goes wider than just Croatia, this is on football fan behavior. There are 6 fan types: football fanatics, club loyalists, icon imitators, FOMO followers, main eventers, and tag-alongs. The study explains that football fanatics, 11% of the fan base, are primarily motivated by the love for the game. They follow all of football with strong emotions. They frequently attend matches for a sense of community, and they believe the club should help make the world better. So we've got people that just want the sport, the engagement with the sport, right? So maybe you've got a Premier League team that you like, but you've also got a Division 2 team, and what's your local team? That kind of thing.
Love of the game, baby.
Your club loyalists make up about 14%, and they are long-term fans that are deeply connected to their club, following high-level football for quality and community. So I guess that's your specific club fans.
Mm-hmm.
Your icon imitators are another...
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call Stoke City high-level football, but
well,
that's just in case Mark's listening. Hi, Mark.
They don't use pig's bladders anymore, not since last year.
Couldn't help shitting on them. Carry on.
Your icon imitators make up 11%, and they tend to be young fans who mainly support specific star players, and they enjoy the bigger matches and the kind of buzz of it, but mostly around the personality. Your FOMO players, or FOMO followers, fear of missing out, make up a larger 27%. They watch football to stay part of conversations. They usually prefer major teams, but with less emotional involvement. So that would be just so that you don't get embarrassed down the pub, I guess.
This is like me for that 1 week in primary school where I was like, Arsenal, I guess.
You've got main eventers, which is a 19% split, and they care more about the occasion than the results. They're often older people or women, apparently, according to this study. I'm not making gender politics remarks here. And they get involved mostly around major tournaments, but not really beyond that.
This might be me being both older and a woman. So my rule for football now is if England make it to the final, I'll watch it.
I don't even know why you'd care that far. And the last group are tag-alongs, which is 19%, which is maybe more like your primary school experience, where you have low emotional ties and are mainly influenced by friends, family, or a national team. So in short, you've got a split of fan groups that represent a whole different groups of motivations, commitments, and emotional attachments, and it varies widely in this breakdown that the European Club Association did themselves.
Interesting. And they're all getting slightly different things out of it, aren't they?
The other bit that I thought was quite interesting from this article that she cites, a 2011 study, so slightly older, which described a couple of patterns of behaviors among fans when it comes to wins and losses in particular. So there's some certain behaviors that the fans will do. Some of it's called brigging, B-R-I-G, and that's
painful.
An abbreviation, but it's just for basking in reflected glory.
Ah, yes.
So this is what you were talking about before. When a team wins, the fans feel good. They identify strongly with the club, and they use phrases like, we won, or we smashed them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more likely to then wear the merch the next day and continue talking about it afterwards and revel in the assumed glory.
For sad little people with no achievements of their own.
Yep. And then conversely, you have corfing, C-O-R-F.
That sounds both painful and sexual.
Sounds like someone from Bristol describing what happens when you have a cold. I was coughing all night, I was. So this is cutting off reflected failure. So some fans, on the inverse of the previous one, they will distance themselves from a team after a poor result. So it stops being we won and it became they lost. Yeah, they avoid association after a defeat. And then this apparently helps you, if you can see this happening in fan behavior, it helps you identify your fair weather fans from the true supporters, i.e. the ones that are only there for the glory.
Yeah. Something I've picked up from this is a fair amount of football supporting and club identity is about enduring misery. This genuinely seems to be part of the identity, part of the appeal. Like we're here to suffer together and our team's shit.
Well, when I tried to find out the understanding of why do people engage with it, so it's not very exciting. They run around a lot. You can get matches ending in 0-0 draws. And sometimes the most exciting thing is a single goal in a game. So goal scarcity is part of the actual event in football.
Isn't that crazy? Because there's certain games like American football and, well, lots of other games where scoring's more frequent and people think this is going to make the game more exciting to watch. And in some ways it does, but in other ways it makes it less interesting because each individual goal or point doesn't actually matter that much because, there's going to be plenty more. Like a rugby game can finish 39-36 or something like that and made up of 8 or 9 individual instances of scoring on each team. But a football game, the scoring is rare enough that each goal really matters and each attack really matters because there might only be 4 shots on goal in a game or even fewer. And so each one really matters. And any fewer than this, if most games finished 0-0, it'd be genuinely boring and no one would watch. So it's somehow hit that just right balance where it actually pushes some of the same buttons that gambling does, like intermittent reinforcement and anticipation of rewards and uncertainty, and all these kind of outcomes all add up to make it quite oddly compelling for something where mostly things aren't happening.
I think it's trying to take those things and stretch them out to the maximum amount of boredom you can wring out of something. I mean, cricket's probably more boring, but fucking 90 minutes of nothing happening, like literally nothing happening, about ball goes back and forth. It's fucking terrible. But apparently that's part of the experience, and all I could think that this is like a stadium full of men collectively edging together because they're like, oh, the tension's building, it's getting more and more exciting. Oh, it's now going to be the time. Oh my god, I'm getting closer. No, he didn't. He ran away again.
But when they do score, the release is almost literally orgasmic.
No, it's fucking lame.
But you can see the fans' faces; they're sort of paralyzed in ecstasy as they wet their trousers.
This isn't this sport is better than that sport, but comparing it to ice hockey, which I've been watching more of in the last few years.
Oh my god, we get it. You love ice hockey. Fucking hell.
It's fucking, football is shit compared to it. The games are shorter. They're broken up with 2 booze breaks, not just one. And it's faster. The pitch is smaller. There's more action, more goals, but not enough that it's like, okay, there's a goal every 3 seconds. No.
But is your ice hockey club giving you a pre-packaged identity, community, tribe, sense of belonging, and century-long storied history?
Depending on which... Well, if you don't follow the NHL, where teams can literally pack up and move to a different city, but if you watch somewhere else, then yeah, just about. The worst experience I had at ice hockey was the first time I went to see it live here, and I was taking another tourist, and I bought what I thought were seats. They weren't seats, they were in the standing end. And it wasn't in the standing end at either end of the stadium. We were in the worst, the noisiest part of the standing area, and it's colloquially known as the cauldron. And that's where the hardcore fans are, the ones that bring drums, the ones that have the guy with a megaphone screaming at them even though he's not watching the game.
So you got the most visceral experience.
Yeah, you're like packed in as well. They've all got where they think that they should be standing. When people finished with their empty plastic cups of beer, you just threw it forward, knowing that it was going to land somewhere. Like there's a separation. It's not going onto the ice, but it was, yeah. And the worst part about that was at the time the stadium was cash only, and I didn't know that and didn't bring any cash with me, so we had to suffer this whole thing completely dry.
Oh no! But there is something attractive in the chaos of that and the sort of undercurrent of violence and madness that's running through with it. When you finish your beer, you just fling it at someone, and that's a sort of a thrill of letting some darker side run a little bit loose. So I just wanted to point out the absurdity of the modern football team. Take Wolverhampton Wanderers, for instance.
Must I? Must I take them?
Yes, you must. Try to enjoy it. Lie back and think of Wolverhampton, if it makes it easier.
I've been to Wolverhampton. It's the last place I'd rather think of.
Wolves, as they're known, popular Premier League side, think?
No, probably not, and not particularly popular either.
I know a guy that likes Wolves. Anyway, they've got supporters.
They're from the outsides of Birmingham, yeah, okay.
The point is, it's owned by a Chinese investment fund, and it has the highest proportion of foreign players. Out of their squad, there's 2 people from the UK that play for Wolves, and it's still somehow thought of as, our club for people that support it. And I think it's really interesting because the badge doesn't change, the mythos doesn't change. Sure, the ownership and the players do, but I don't know, it's crazy to me how little it has to do with Wolverhampton now, really, other than essentially a bit of superficial branding.
As long as you let as long as you let the fans paint themselves in the same colour,
Wolves grey.
and you give them a slightly updated jersey every year that they can show how loyal they are because they've got the latest one, then it's okay. Isn't it a bit like, if we go back to our peasant metaphor, this is if the king died every couple of years and a new king comes in, but you're supposed to fight for him just as fervently, and you fucking do.
Yeah, I suppose. They're not really thinking that they're supporting the new owner, they're still supporting the club, right? Yeah. So football's got a long association with racism as well. And what I think is interesting about this is, whilst fans have often racially abused their own players, if the player becomes a valued player, they transcend their race and they become one of them. They're one of the good ones.
Fucking hell, transcend your race. Jesus, I don't know if we can be saying that.
But you know what I mean, though, right?
Yeah.
If you happen to be a racist football supporter, but your top striker is a black dude, and, he's all right, he's one of the good ones, but you hate the other teams more than you hate that black guy. He's good. He's one of the, he's a Wolves player. He's a Wolves legend. We like him.
I think that football supporters, because of some of their fan base, or the hardcore traditional parts of their fan base, you're going to hear some of the worst divisive racism that's casually accepted. And this is what mentioned that, the clubs and fair play organizations are trying to steer away from, but it doesn't happen overnight. And those pockets of bigots are still found largely in your football fans.
Yeah, and the thing is, football appeals to people that want some sort of tribalism in their life. That's kind of the main appeal about it, really. Because as we've discussed, the game itself has some addictive elements, but it's not exactly it's no different really from any other game, other than it's a bit more accessible. But anyway, the point being, it attracts tribalistic people. When you've got us and them mentalities with football clubs, it's not a big stretch to think, well, us and them tribalistic people, they're going to naturally be inclined to racism because it's the same shoe that fits, right?
It's because you're developing in, we're good, we're us, and everything else is other. You find whatever you can to say about the opposing side to be derogatory towards them or to call them out as being different from you. So racism is an easy and clear way to do that. This is, there's some horrible examples. Like, I don't know which club and which player it was, but there were fans that was one particular black player. They were making monkey noises at him when he came on the pitch and stuff.
Yeah,
I think that was an international game.
Throw bananas on the pitch and stuff like this.
Yeah, but it's pretty bad.
I think it's a very difficult task to eradicate racism. Have to eradicate racism from everyone before it gets eradicated from football.
And part of this is, as you said, it's a mob mentality that people get into. This is why they think that they can get away with racism, get away with sexism and stuff like that, because you're in a crowd and therefore you've got this level of anonymity. They won't know which one of us did it, especially
yes.
If we're going to touch on the ultras, which are the worst of fan bases that happen across multiple countries. Italy's got some pretty bad ones.
Who are the ultras?
Ultras? Don't know about ultras. So these are
are these one of the infamous football firms?
These are the hardcorest fans that can be found in a lot of clubs, like South America have them as well. They'll be the ones that put on the massive coordinated displays at the stadium where they all lift up cards or their shirts or whatever at a certain time, and the colours change in the stadium, so that as a group of people you make the club logo, or you put up one of these huge flags that covers 1,000 people and they pass it up through them. The guys that kind of coordinate these and have the online groups, these are the ultras. But they're also usually on the front lines of when these things spill over into riots, because they self-identify as hooligans, a lot of them. So they'll turn up ready with balaclavas or at least face coverings, which immediately adds that level of anonymity and hiding, so that you're basically there ready for trouble.
And a lot of the time, these fights between football firms, hooligan sub-organisations, the fights are pre-arranged and kind of semi-formal almost. And I've heard it said before that at the fighting, some football broke out.
Yeah.
So that's the game for them. That's the real game that's on.
Yeah, some of the clubs that have these subcultures of self-identified hooligans and ultras, the internet helps them, but they're engaging with each other and opposing teams online when there's particularly big games coming up, trying to identify who amongst the opposing team are their equivalent, and then exactly, they'll be starting some of this, they'll be kicking off in anticipation of the game and almost arranging where they're going to find the other team to have this level of street fights, basically.
Who are equally up for it.
Yeah, Exactly. Which one of you thinks you're hard enough?
Yes, in the absence of war, football violence will have to do.
Yeah, this is getting into the dark side of football fandom. So the hooliganism and violence is the obvious part. And it's, as we said, it's not every fan. This is a smaller minority. Usually the ones that like to attend in person are going to be the ones that are going to be most geared up for this. But it doesn't represent everyone. It is the underbelly of football fanaticism. Just getting all my caveats in.
Speaking of football violence firms, I discovered by accident the origin of the chav, the humble chav. If you remember chavs.
The humble chav. Of course
from
I
the
do.
90s and early 2000s, and they just sort of disappeared in 2010.
I think they just became the entire population. I don't think they went anywhere.
Well, they became roadmen, but chavs came directly out of football violence. And in the 80s, when football violence was at its peak, the police started taking more heavy-handed matters, and they would pick out likely-looking lads wearing football strips and, detain them or arrest them preemptively before they could cause any violence. And in order to pass undetected, these groups started dressing differently. They no longer turned up in the football strip. They started turning up in smarter clothing or designer clothing, sometimes stolen from international cities where they'd gone to watch a match, and they would break into clothing shops, or not break into, just literally steal things from them, sometimes paid, and would come back with all this Italian designer sportswear. And this started because when they turned up at matches wearing this stuff, they didn't look like normal football hooligans. They would pass undetected and unmolested by the police, and they could get their fight on as they saw fit. And this kind of evolved into a culture of wearing more and more expensive clothing, things like Burberry and Fred Perry. And this is what gave rise to the chav, which is a guy wearing oddly upmarket brands, but who is essentially out looking for violence. And they were everywhere in the 90s and 2000s. It mixed between football and working class fashion at that point.
I think that's one take on where it came from. I think it just, unfortunately, was how British socio-economic factors all came together to create a subclass of human. But maybe it's possible that's where the designer stuff came from to start with. But certainly all the ones that were around when we were growing up, that wasn't authentic Burberry. That was all Camden Market Burberry.
Exactly.
So the knockoffs came through very quickly because that was what they were imitating, and maybe that's exactly the reason for it, yeah.
It was easier to get a knockoff than pay for the real thing. Burberry themselves did launch a Burberry baseball cap, which was popular, counterfeit or otherwise, but the brand damage started racking up quickly as people began associating Burberry not with the upper middle class or the class elites, but with chavs, and sales began declining, and they quickly dissociated themselves, stopped making Burberry baseball caps, and raised prices to go up market again.
I only know of it as the wear of the chav. I wouldn't have known of Burberry as anything else.
Yeah, that was my first contact with it, and I'll always think of it that way. So the last talking point I have is I looked into the mythology of various clubs, because each club has its kind of own story, its own important events, and their own kind of character of how they see themselves. So I can run through a couple of these, if that's interesting.
And then mighty Zeus said unto David, Giveth thee the golden boot, and take with it the banana shot of history, and then marry a snotty bitch, and move to the US, and barely play any football ever again.
Wait a minute, is that the story of David Beckham?
Yeah.
As told by Zeus.
I literally said David at the start.
I think I was thinking David and Goliath at the beginning of that, and then I was like, wait, no, that's not him, it's just someone else.
You culturally ignorant swine thinking of Bible stories. Obviously I meant David Beckham.
The true David.
Mm.
The one
true David.
So yeah, Arsenal, for instance, supposedly they're the club of elegance and intelligence and clever technical football. Their stereotype is not, we'll fuck you up, it's, we're going to outplay you. And their greatest teams that they ever fielded became known as the Invincibles because they did an entire season without losing a single game. So that's interesting. Liverpool...
There you go, throwing that word around again, willy-nilly, calling things interesting when they're not.
Apart from the fact this is interesting, I am contractually obligated to call stuff interesting. If we make a podcast and we tell people this is boring, they're not going to like it. So shut your cockhole and enjoy this.
Can't make me. You're not a priest.
That's interesting. Liverpool has a slightly different mythology. It's not football well, not just football, it's working class solidarity, tragedy, resilience, and their mythology is basically we suffer, we endure, we come back. So they were involved in the Hillsborough disaster, and yeah, they admire redemption, supposedly, as a mythos. So Manchester United, their mythology is kind of, greatness and the giant, all this historical success under Alex Ferguson, which they will return to one day.
But again, these are things about football clubs rather than about football fans.
But it's a mythology that people are buying into. So when you decide to support a club,
it's probably fan-made mythology as well.
Yeah, it is. It is, absolutely. It's a narrative that is created by the fans based on historical matches. You could just look at a spreadsheet of wins and losses. That's not very interesting. But the fans create a story, a narrative, and a mythology around it, which people will then subsequently buy into.
God, you know what was interesting, Joe? Do you remember back in the day, back in the 90s, when the football scores would be read out, like basically from a spreadsheet on probably something like Radio 2, I don't know. But it was, here's me reading out a list of all the weekend results. Tottenham, 0. Liverpool, 1.
I remember this, yeah.
Manchester United, 2. Arsenal, 1. Stoke-on-Trent, didn't play. They don't have a Pelé. Ipswich Town, 0. Any other team, 6. And he just went on and on and on and on. It was so interesting to hear. I could fall asleep in the car to it. It was good stuff.
That's a condensed set of results, I guess. The last club I'm going to talk about, and then we will do Dark Side, is the Mighty Potters, Stoke City. And I took an interest in this because of Mark's support of them. So if Liverpool's mythology is resilience, Manchester United's is greatness, Stoke's is probably grit. And here's a quote that I like. It originated from comments by a pundit called Andy Gray, who was questioning whether technically gifted foreign players could cope with Stoke's physical, direct style in poor winter conditions. And the quote is, "Can they do it on a cold, rainy night in Stoke?" And I
think I've actually heard that being used in the office by an Englishman.
It's quite popular. It kind of resonated with the fans a lot. And this reference to a physical, direct style is basically, Stoke are well known for basically being violent on the pitch. I don't know what game they were playing, but it wasn't football. There's another genuine quote from someone that played them. And Mark gave me a quote here from Tony Pulis, who was the manager of Stoke during their most successful period.
When they scored a goal once, yeah?
When they scored a goal once. Someone asked him, how are they going to cope with, these technical, fast attackers when they haven't got the pace to keep up with them? And he said, they won't be fast when they're limping. Or they can't limp fast, I think, is the quote. Again, I just love this.
There's a man who knows what his team's good at.
Yeah. We won't necessarily win, but you will know that you've played us.
Splitting skins and hacking shins.
Absolutely. So yeah, shall we do Dark Side?
I think we've more or less covered it in my rant about football violence and hooliganism and how intrinsically tied to people's perception, if nothing else, of football fandom it is. So that, I think, is the biggest dark side. There was a fairly crap YouTube video called Uncover the Dark Side of Football. I mean, it was just poorly made with a sort of AI type voice over very generic video clips. But there's a few quotes that basically summed up how this goes, which is marginalized groups in society cling to fandom for a sense of community and belonging. And they note that their frustration over other areas of their life, i.e. a lack of economic opportunity, is often channeled into violence in the name of loyalty to the club.
That seems like a good point.
And as you said, this us versus them psychology and then peer pressure combined with drinking and mob mentality creates a group dynamic, which is a hotbed of peer pressure for people doing things they wouldn't normally do, i.e. displaying violent acts as a form of loyalty to the club.
We've also got, as we've said before with numerous other subcultures, when this one interest becomes your whole identity, that's not a healthy psychological place for you to be. Well-rounded people should have lots of things that make up their identity, not just, I'm a fan of this club. There's also having a vicarious sense of achievement and a vicarious sense of loss without actually any individual.
I think the dark side of, it's probably more a dark side of football rather than it is a dark side of fandom, but is the increasing commercialization by clubs and the fact that those are corporate entities now, as opposed to being locally run organizations around a factory, or the local rich guy owns the pitch, so he's kind of in charge of it.
There's only a handful of UK clubs actually owned by UK interests now.
Yeah,
and the vast majority of players, I don't know if that's true, but a lot of the players are foreign nationals anyway.
Not fucking Russian oligarchs as a way of hiding their ill-gotten gains.
That's the dark side, actually, is the owners often use a football club to basically do reputational laundering.
And just straight up money laundering, in that you use your shifty money to buy a football club because it's failing, and you get out of it less, trickling in over time, but that's been laundered clean. I mean, fans nowadays are kind of just cash cows, and they are there to keep buying and buying and buying until the corporation has leaked everything out of them.
I think the loyalty the fans show to the clubs is very one way. I think, exactly as you said, the clubs increasingly see fans as cash cows to be milked. And even then, they only make up 20% of the club's revenue, so they're not even that important.
I mean, the ticket prices go up every year, the merch changes every year, so that if you want to, I don't know, show your support or
have an up-to-date strip, then you have to buy a new one every year.
Yep.
These T-shirts football shirts cost £5 to produce, and they sell them for 80 quid a pop.
Exactly. The games aren't broadcast for free on your BBC channels that you pay a licensing fee for.
Oh yeah, they're actually quite hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, some of the big ones are, I guess. But yeah, it's mostly subscription services, something that you have to have a package for, or
Football
directly
package.
stream one to. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty far removed from the terraces and the working class routes of you go down there on a Saturday and have a few pints, come back with some change in your pocket.
It's easier to go watch it at the pub, really.
So those are the kind of the dark sides I can think of. Mob mentality, and as we talked about, racism, sexism, division in how fans think it's okay to treat people when they're in the anonymity of a crowd is all pretty dark.
Domestic violence increases on match days.
Brilliant. That's great.
Especially if the team loses, but also if it wins.
If they win.
Yeah.
Yay, I'm in a violent mood.
But this isn't to say that football causes domestic violence. It just, people that are abusive, it's an excuse for them to be abusive. It doesn't create abusers.
We have to also be careful around correlation there, because commonality is not causality. Most games are on a weekend and people are at home more on a weekend, so you can say that, yeah, domestic violence might go up on a match day, but match days are also many other days, as in it's always a Saturday or a Sunday, and therefore you're more likely to get knocked around at home on a Saturday or a Sunday regardless of whether there's a game on, if we want to try and look at it that way.
Maybe. I hope that the study accounted for that. I don't know off the top of my head.
Fair enough.
That's the people that put too much stake in whether their team wins or loses, and they personally feel the pain or the elation.
That's someone who...
Odd way to celebrate, though.
Is not a well-balanced person, may or may not have their identity tied into the success of their club, but certainly doesn't have the cognitive faculties to find a proper outlet for their frustration, because hitting your significant other or abusing your significant other in any way is unacceptable, regardless of whether your team's won or lost, it's raining outside, or you just stubbed your toe. None of these are excuses.
Go and play football like Stoke. Hack someone in the shins. Get it out like that.
Go and join the Ultras. With any luck, you'll be stabbed to death, you stupid bastard.
Well, you really don't like these guys.
No, I don't like people, domestic abusers.
Well, yeah. You don't like the domestic violence people. No. Yeah, fine.
Go and put yourself in a dangerous situation, you know? Instead of beating your wife, why don't you go drive a car drunk? That sounds like a better idea.
That'd be sad. Sad if something should happen to them.
Do you want to move on? Have you any other talking points? Do you want to move on to one of our other big questions?
I think I want to move on to one of the big questions now, mate. Tell me, our kid, is it sexual? Sexual?
Well, might have been the least sexual sound. Is it sexual? Is football fandom sexual? I could not find an argument to support it being sexual.
Zero that I found.
We can speculate that maybe men are more horned up on after a victory, but the subculture itself does not have an intrinsically sexual element.
No, not a thing. It doesn't even have the repressed homosexuality of rugby.
Or bumball.
Yeah, that's pretty much that for that section.
Yeah. It's getting breezed over.
It does not.
So, after you've done the reading, after you've learned a bit more about what it is to be a fan, how do you feel about football fandom?
I think I understand it better now. I think being a football fan is probably less about football than pretty much any other fandom is. It's almost got the least to do with the supposed subject. It's not really about football, it's about belonging, I think, and a pre-packaged culture, identity, tribe, reason to be, all this kind of, tied into local community. It's all these kind of things, which also happens to have a sport attached to it, which is relatively easy to follow and get an emotional journey out of, which can be engaging.
I've got a quote from that ResearchGate article which directly backs up exactly what you said. Fans differ from regular spectators due to their deep psychological need for connection and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you don't find that in other sports as much, because other sports are less geographically tied, which means they're less tied to a community, they're less tied to a narrative history, a bunch of shared memories. A lot of other sports, they tend to be more about individuals than they are about teams. And in fact, even the football teams, it's not really so much about the teams, it's about the clubs themselves. The teams come and go and they change, but the clubs have an enduring identity that is easy to access in football. For instance, something like tennis, none of this stuff exists. It's individual stars.
Well, tennis is an individual game. Football is a team game. I would say that rugby, it's got a shared history, as you've quite rightly educated us on, but the rugby team is the important thing there. Again, it's the colours that you wear. It's the club legacy rather than necessarily the individual players. I think the European ice hockey, similarly, a lot of clubs are quite proud of tracing their lineage back to this having started, but it's a newer sport because it's not really that long that you've been able to create an artificial stadium of ice to play in.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that separates, for instance, ice hockey from football. Ice hockey, you need a fair amount of equipment and facilities to do, unless you've got a frozen river somewhere, a frozen lake. Football, you just need a ball and a field of some sort of size. And again, rugby, you need different facilities. You need posts. There's a more physical aspect to rugby where the bigger you are, the better. Whereas football, you can be a short, skinny player and still skillful and effective. So I think it's like these few subtle distinctions that mean football has mass appeal in a way that rugby doesn't. There's,
nice.
You also get hurt playing rugby more. It's a higher risk game. So yeah, that's my opinion after research. What about yours?
I learned some things. I guess it's a nice thing in theory to be a fan of something. So showing your support for like a band or a show or whatever by having a piece of memorabilia and merch, I can get behind that and frequently do. And like you mentioned, at concerts when a band thanks the fans and everyone's singing together and they appreciate that they wouldn't be there without people buying tickets and their albums to directly financially support them. Because of that, in part, that is the function of the fan, as I mentioned, not necessarily to the same extent as being a cash cow. But this engagement can make or break a club, I think, on a smaller scale. So beyond the ones where you've got your multi-million pound bankrolled billionaires that own them, without the subs and dues of fans for some smaller clubs, maybe like your Stoke, they wouldn't necessarily be financially viable to enter competitions or even train regularly. So fans do have a function in this, and I understand that it entertains people for whatever reason. Not personally, I find it incredibly dull. And that being around other like-minded people lets you engage with it outside of just a match. So it gives you a way to kind of continue that enjoyment beyond the 90 minutes on the pitch.
And to connect with other people.
Yeah, exactly. And give you that community like you've mentioned before, wanting a community to be available to you. So I'm not against fans and fandom, but football fan culture seems to take things to a different extreme. And the size and scale of fans at games especially just irradiates threat if you've ever been surrounded by a group like that. Even if it's just you happen to walk down the wrong street after a match is letting out and this outpouring of fans in you don't know what kind of mood because you don't know the outcome of the game. Some of them, if you're inside the bigger stadiums with these ultras where they're making a huge amount of noise, they're lighting flares, it feels incredibly uncomfortable for me to be around something like that. And maybe just it's in part because I know this checkered history of violence which sits in the back of my mind and runs underneath fandom potentially as an undercurrent, but it doesn't feel good to be around football fans, in my opinion.
No, I would agree. Sometimes there's a sort of brash, humorous laddiness to it, but that's separate from the violent undertones or overtones. And I wonder actually, without football or violence, what is the outlet for frustrated, economically disadvantaged young men that aren't being sent to war?
It doesn't even have to be necessarily economically disadvantaged ones. I think we've both known people that are well enough off to know better and still have to be a lout or when it comes to football.
Listen to our episode on the Manosphere,
Episode 16, Red Pill and the Manosphere.
Episode 16. But yeah, I don't know what their outlet is. the Romans had gladiatorial blood sport as an outlet for the violent urges of the masses. They were very realistic about the nature of people, the Romans. And I don't know, in making football safer and increased CCTV presence and facial recognition technology and cracking down hard on football violence, this is a good thing. It would be nice to not have football violence at football games. But I do, in a broader sense, wonder, it's kind of like whack-a-mole, right? If you suppress the violent outpourings in one part of our culture and society, it probably isn't going to just disappear. It's going to reappear somewhere else. And I just wonder where that will be.
Oh, so you're not necessarily against it because you're like, well, it's got to go somewhere. You might as well go there somewhere that I don't give a shit about.
I mean, I am against it, but in a Roman sense, I wonder if it's better to have some sort of safe outlet for it. I don't know what that would be in the modern world.
Bring back the pig's bladder up the high street every Saturday. Just let them go nuts.
Call of Duty. I don't know. There is a football game in Orkney, the Orkney Islands, north of Scotland, where it's the Uppies versus the Doonies, whether you're from the north side of the island or south side. And they have an old school peasant style bar game, as they call it, where hundreds of them hack this ball up and down the street for several hours until someone wins or everyone's dead.
Everyone gets tired. Interesting.
Yeah.
So with that idea of there being a pre-baked culture and a community for you to join, do you think you could be into it? After a bit of research, do you think it's maybe scratched an itch that you didn't know you had and you could delve into it a bit more?
I've never actually been to a football game, and I keep meaning to go to one. Mark keeps insisting he's going to take me to one, and I kind of want to go. I want to get absorbed in it, this mass mentality, at least for a little bit. I want to turn over control of my brain and give up independent thought for a little bit and become absorbed into the hive mind of the football fan for a bit, chant something.
You want it too much then?
Feel part of something, be driven to despair by a bad decision from the ref and be driven to the brink or over of orgasm by a great goal in the 94th minute and have this emotional journey, just feel like a regular human for a bit and then go home and never do it again. That's what I want to do because I don't care. What about you? I get the sense you've still got zero interest in this.
Yeah, no, I absolutely hate it. I fucking hate it. It's all the worst things about a collection of humans. It's blind loyalty to a cause which has no meaning. It's mob mentality and people feeling like they can act in an unacceptable way, even if that's just joining in a mass chant, but it's incredibly racist and it's not violent because they feel the anonymity of a group. I despise it. I don't like being around them. I find it uncomfortable and the sport's boring as fuck. So for all my trying to sound balanced, I think this is fucking stupid.
That's fair. It's 22 millionaires kicking around a ball, all in the name of selling more Nike trainers.
Ooh, burn. Burn on you, millionaires. That's going to hurt, isn't it? Put some ointment on that. They'll be suffering the next day.
Yeah, if I was being paid 250 grand a week, I don't think I would care about anything anyone says about me.
Do you think you'd have some pride in what you were doing, though? I'm being paid a lot of money for this. Might as well do it well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I would. I'd want the cash flow to continue. But if the fastest growing podcast of 2026, if their pundits said, I think it's a bit shit, I don't think I'd sweat it too much. That's us, by the way. We're that podcast.
I was going to say, you're right to us. So if you'd like to express your opinion and be a pundit on the fastest growing podcast of 2026, you can do so by engaging with us on social media and not in the street in any sense of the way. Don't put on a mask and come and find me ever. Stay away from me. I live under a rock. You can find us in the virtual space on X. We are at Sub-Subculture Pod. Yeah, all the short things. On Instagram, we are at Sub-Subculture Podcast. And our Reddit page, our Sub-Subculture Podcast, is probably the most active one. That's the best place to get us. Get on Reddit, that community of gatekeepery fucks.
That wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Yep. Leave us comments. Tell us if you're a football fan. Tell us who you support and why. Why are you into being a football fan? What's your connection with the fandom? Or suggest other topics that we can get into. And if we cover them, we'll give you a little shout out. Tell everyone you sent us here. It would be nice. It would be nice to hear your footballing stories.
One thing that I didn't mention was that it's estimated around 40% of the entire globe has some stake in football. So this is easily the biggest subculture we've covered. It's almost the main culture.
We are the subculture by not liking it.
Yeah, practically. Crazy shit.
We'll cover ourselves next time.
Oh no. Self-analysis. My nemesis.
But that is not what we're talking about next time. Next time, we're talking about Disney adults. Do you know what that is? I certainly fucking don't.
You're going to love this one.
Joe brought it. Maybe I am a Disney adult. I was raised on Disney. I'm looking forward to this, actually, now.
I will tell you for free, you are not. And you are not going to like this.
I might.
You're going to long for football fans. You're going to long for good, honest, racist violence.
That's a spicy taster. Can't wait for that next time. But until then, until me getting horrified by something Disney related, it's goodbye from me. And thank you for coming on, Joe. Thank you for your opinions, as always.
Thank you for your analysis and insight, Andrew. And thank you for reminding me every time I said the word interesting that it was in fact boring. Really constructive. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That.
What are friends for other than calling you a prick to your face?
Audience probably enjoyed that too. So top work. Let's wrap this up.
Obey my dog.